Hey guys, how you doing out there? We have an exam this week. Alright, so exams have been posted for this unit. Chapters 1 through 5, right? According to our official syllabus, right? Test the week of September 14th through the 21st. It'll be due 4 p.m. on the 21st. There are 5 questions, as you will see, as you open the exam. 4 questions from the 5 chapters. Don't have as much on the exam from chapter 5. I don't mean to minimize chapter 5, early China, but I'm going to ask you to put a little bit more on that material in the discussion board when I do the video for chapter 5, which will be next time, right? For this lecture, it's going to be India rather quickly because I hope you already viewed 52 minutes of Michael Wood's Ancient India. So I'm going to take advantage of that and move through this chapter, number 4, rather quickly. Work on your essays. There is one essay related to current events. You will find those articles, current events articles, in the content section of Blackboard. Right? So 4 questions from the lecture and the textbook only. Please don't go to other sources. Please do not try to Wikipedia the stuff. Right? Blackboard's algorithm will flag it as plagiarism. Okay? So meaning copied from another source. So 4 from the textbook and lectures, and 1 question from the current events. Okay. All right. Speaking of current events, major and tragic wildfires in the Pacific Northwest. Gosh, 5 million acres have burned in the West. But conservative media says has nothing to do with climate change. Nothing to see here. Please move on, people. Keep that in mind. 20, 30, 40 years from now, when you look back to this era and see how people were denying climate change. Okay. The polar caps are melting, people. California, Oregon, Washington are on fire. There's 5 cyclones in the Atlantic as I speak. Those are proto-hurricanes, a major storm hitting the upper Gulf Coast right now. But no climate change. You can't trust science. So it's interesting. I wonder if these conservative media stars, who actually are probably denying, I don't want to quote them, probably denying that COVID exists or certainly its severity, are in reality trusting science to stay well or hoping for a vaccine from science, right? Well, look, media makes money, right? Even the New York Times exists to make money. These are for-profit corporations. And people might lie to you if it makes money, right? So people are not always moral. As history shows, okay, the present shows as well. So keep up with news, even the stuff I don't post. A little more germane to what we need to do, especially in the short amount of time I have in these 2 lectures for Chapter 4. Make sure you're checking the content. Yeah, we're kind of done with the posted chapters. There's a quiz for Chapter 4, Ancient India, that's up. Syllabus, that's old news, discussion. Yes, the big discussion on Chapter 4. Current events articles, there you go. And the exam. Oh, the exam, right? So, again, as I said at the outset, 5 questions, 20 points each, due on the 21st at 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. All right, guys, get going. I need to get going with chapter number 4, Early India. Again, this will go a bit quickly, but the advantage of this remote learning is you could slow down YouTube. You could also fast forward YouTube. You could even watch YouTube more than once if you go too quickly. So, early societies in South Asia. We're talking about India, but not really the India of today, not the same borders of India today. We're talking about the subcontinent, which would include Pakistan, Bangladesh, the peninsula jutting into the Indian Ocean, which apparently was in contact, right, with Egypt and Mesopotamia, and then we have this purple section in this map, Indus Valley Civilization. Your book will call it Harappan Society, and not to confuse you, we'll go along with the book, right? Harappa was actually just one of the cities, many cities, one of the largest, but okay, we'll call it Harappan Society. Circa, that little C there means circa 2000 BCE, before the Common Era, about 4,020 years ago. Right? Harappan Society, well, even before we get to Harappan Society, we have gatherers and hunters. A couple 100,000 years ago, right? Neolithic farming. perhaps 10,000 years ago, maybe just a little bit later start, growing rice. I'm thinking the basmati rice, or at least an ancestor to basmati rice. Indus Valley settlement, so in the Indus Valley, right, it's a riverine system. There's going to be farming along the banks. Irrigation less necessary because of the regular monsoon rains, but nonetheless a group effort required. Agriculture meant settlement, settlement meant villages. In some cases, villages evolved into cities. Right? Actually, the group effort that was involved was essentially irrigating because the rivers and their tributaries would silt up, would kind of fill up with dirt, basically, and you had to keep cleaning them out. There's an archaeological record. Once we get cities and towns, we can't read this stuff. Pretty fascinating symbology, symbols, undeciphered. So maybe you, with the help of AI technology, can decipher this stuff, which means chapter 4 would be even larger than it is, right? So what are we going to look at if we can't read the writing? Well, they had writing in the cities. Let's look at the cities, the archaeological record. Cedars are made of brick. Actually, the bricks are kind of, sort of, it's just coincidental. It must be the size of a hand, right? Kind of the same as we're familiar with, kind of the red bricks. If you go to JCC campus, you'll see a lot of them, both in Olean and Jamestown, right? The people living in this region, we will call them Dravidians. They're growing rice, also cotton. They're not eating the cotton, they're making clothing out of it, which is pretty convenient in this humid, warm climate, okay? Not to be wearing like wool or fur or something, okay? Also raising chickens, right? Population is going up, and we see kind of similar specialization. Somebody raises the chickens, somebody cleans the silt out of the irrigation canals, somebody grows the rice, somebody's the brick maker, that's an important job, and the brick layer. Someone's the architect, someone's in charge, someone explains how the universe worked, and it was probably women. Right? There's a good evidence that there were both priests, male priests, and priestesses, female religious figures. In fact, there were female goddesses, we believe. I need to say we believe, and probably because we can't read the writing. Okay, so we're using the archaeological record. There are small and large settlements. The largest, Mohenjo-Daro, about 35,000 people at its peak, which was about 3,000 years ago. Some are quite small. I've been to some of them on the India side of the border, not the Pakistan side of today's border. Okay, it was a place called Ropar, for example. One thing about all these towns, all the bricks are the same size. So what does that mean? There's a standard civilization. Okay? Somebody's in charge saying make the bricks the same size and actually lay the streets out in a grid-like pattern. Okay? So there we go, Mohenjo-Daro. I said 35,000. Oops, okay. We'll just round it up to 40,000. Okay? Agricultural economy. These people not only had gridiron streets, like streets and avenues in squares like you're familiar with, they also had sewers and pools. Never the twain shall meet, I hope, right? Pools like bathing pools, like ritual pools. Before you went into a temple, probably, I gotta say probably, you would cleanse yourself. Ritual ablution. We see that in Indian religions today. We also see that through other faiths as well, right? Catholic Church, for example, holy water when you go into the church, right? So it's kind of cleansing the body symbolically to purify the soul. Sewers, but that's interesting. Yeah, in the Indus Valley civilization, Harappan society, some of the wealthy homes had kind of a room that would have a tile floor and kind of a hole in the floor connected to pipes that drained into the river, which you know isn't that sanitary for the river, but certainly for the household it was. And people would kind of stand or squat over that hole and do their business, or maybe stand over it and dump some water over there for a shower. So it's your shower, your toilet all in one, and that water would kind of flush things away. So, although you might think that's primitive, there's nothing like that in Europe for the next 2,500 plus 1,500, 4,000 years, okay, at least, right? We do see social distinctions. Some people had bigger and better homes, like inner courtyards where it's nice and cool and shaded, and some people had crappy homes, okay? Probably down where the sewer emptied into the river. Okay? Religion, fertility was a focus, and we believe the feminine figures we see in the small statues are of goddesses, so mother goddess perhaps. Many of the religious figures we believe are zoomorphic, so gods with animal qualities. Okay? elephant, strong and smart like an elephant, or ferocious like a lion, or smart like a monkey. Okay? We will perhaps see those deities continue into the Indian religion of Hinduism, at least in some of the Hindu forms today. Harappan society began to decline after 1900 BCE, well, okay, 3,900 years ago. And here's the tie-in to the New York Times that I started with, probably due to environmental degradation. If you're going to make 15,000 towns and cities out of brick is made out of clay and maybe some hay, but you have to bake the brick really hot with charcoal, which requires a lot of wood, which requires a lot of cutting of trees, which means you don't have trees left. And then the monsoon rain comes, and then there goes your soil. It silts up the rivers change course, it changes the composition of the soil, you can't farm, you go hungry, you can't feed the cities, you need to leave the cities. Okay? Yeah. These people didn't disappear. I mean, I'm sure many died, but they didn't get wiped out due to any type of famine. They left the cities. They couldn't feed the cities. If all of our farmers went on strike, we'd have to leave the cities, right? There'd be no food coming in. After a while, your cupboards are bare. You've got to go out to the countryside and try to forage, right? And maybe start farming yourself. That's probably what happened to the Dravidians. There could have been natural disasters, but I think climate change, at least in a micro scale, not a global scale for these people, was the natural disaster. Here we see Hanadara, the citadel, kind of the temple, bathing pool, pretty cool stuff. In fact, this whole society was forgotten. The Dravidians left, the jungle took over, I should say the forest took over this land, and it's largely forgotten until British railroad engineers moving through this region. It was a British colony in the 19th century. So sometime in the mid-1800s, start digging to put railroad in and hit bricks. Like, what the hell are bricks doing under the soil, right? And they uncover the civilization. So in many ways it was forgotten, at least with respect to archaeology. The cities, the writing, the artifacts were forgotten. Beliefs, and certainly the people, will live on. Okay? So cities are abandoned, yes, cultural continuities. The people and their culture and their religious beliefs live on, although the writing in cities were lost. Okay? So Dravidian people survive. After the decline of Harappan society, newcomers came into the region, people from the north, people from beyond the Caucasus Mountains, lighter-skinned people. Okay? They called themselves the noble ones. Would have sounded something like Aryans, right? Not Aryans, but Aryans. And they moved in. In kind of Nazi myth, okay, the Nazis, yes, the German Nazis, kind of jumped on this and claimed that somehow it was the white people taking over darker-skinned people, thus white people are superior. It was a bunch of BS, okay? This was a wandering of people over more than 1,000 years. If I'm an Aryan, I'm moving down from southern Russia, Ukraine, with my horse, maybe my cow, because there's not enough grass there, maybe some temporary climate change, not human-induced like ours, and I'm looking for greener pasture. I wander into northwest India. I get married to a Dravidian woman. Our children will be of mixed parentage. Our children will mix the culture. Okay? It's not a takeover, folks. Okay? It's a wandering of people over several centuries. So don't buy into this kind of Aryan nonsense of superior light-skinned people. It's just someone looking for grass for his cow, okay? Many people, right? We talked about the Indo-European migrations previously in chapter, let me check my notes here, chapter 2. Okay? And we said, well, they ended up in Ireland. Yes, they called themselves the Ayer. Some ended up in Iran. Some ended up as Aryans in India. They're all related, genetically and linguistically. They carry their language, their DNA, and their religious beliefs into the new lands. They were not literate, although they did have a wheel. They had more than one wheel. They had wheel technology. Okay? They also knew how to make iron. So, they also knew how to fight one another. How do we know if they didn't write things down? In their songs, okay, in their stories, in the songs they sang about themselves and their gods. Kind of like the song that gets stuck in your head. Imagine that happening for hundreds of years. In fact, imagine if it's the priests teaching their sons. Now the Aryans were more patriarchal, right? The priests are males. They have to be a male to be a priest, yes, and you need to be the son of a priest to be a priest. Okay. Stories and songs passed on, father to son, to son to son to son to son, right? And of course they changed somewhat over time, but the core of those sagas, those Vedas, we'll call them, remain true. Okay. Well, they say, well, our tribe fought the other tribe. The god of, the Indra, the god of lightning, throws lightning bolts at his enemies. If that sounds familiar, it should, because cousins, so to speak, of these Aryans were the Greeks. And you're probably more familiar with that dude named Zeus, or Jupiter, or maybe, I've forgotten who it is, the branch of the Indo-Europeans who end up in Scandinavia. Was it Odin? Not Thor, but that cast of characters, right? They're all kind of related. Thus, I'm checking my clock here as I'm trying to speak and I'm stuttering. So too are the religions. Okay? Polytheistic. Language, somewhat related. So a word for brother in Sanskrit, which enters India, I don't know it, all right? It would sound something like brother, okay? Probably start with an F. Fratello, or in Italian, or frère, fraternal in English, okay? The word for fire, the word for wheel, the word for king, Raja, ruler, Ray, Roy, okay? These are all similar. Okay? Not every word. People moved into, what did they discover? They moved into a warmer climate and they discovered a palm tree. There's no Indo-European word for palm tree. They're going to have to borrow that word from the people living where there were palm trees. No palm trees in Ukraine. Okay? All right, so Sanskrit is the language. Vedas were hymns of their gods, an oral tradition that will later be written down. Passed on, again, father to son, etc., for hundreds of years before it's passed down. That becomes really a core of Hinduism. So these Vedas show war. They're the hymns. They show Indra, this is a much later statue of Indra, as a war god. They move through those brick cities and they probably wonder, what the heck is this stuff? Let's just keep going. There's no food. And over time, they're going to intermarry with the Dravidians. Oh, the Dravidians who had left the cities, yes, or at least the children of the Dravidians are going to get married to the Aryans. We're going to have a mixed culture. People are going to mix their genes, their religion, their language. That's how history works. Okay. Rajas, well, there's a word that sounds like royal, right? Set up small kingdoms in the northwest of India. From the Indus Valley, they push into the Ganges, they clear the land, create kingdoms, settle down, and intermarry with the Dravidians. So finally, they stop fighting so much and start to settle down and farm. The caste system. Let's pause here for a commercial break. Yes, if anyone would sponsor this, and come back with the rest of chapter 4. I'm also going to just catch my breath. So, all right, pick up in part 2 with the caste system.